Hi, you're welcome to Brotherscode, and my name is Shay Daniels. It's such a joy to have you here. Brotherscode is an initiative that God has laid in my heart to help raise the bar for men by speaking about things that have to do with men, having conversations about things that we don't talk about. And you're welcome to Brotherscode.
Hi, my name is David Johnson. I'm a youth development worker, businessman, sound engineer, father, and I'm an ex pastor's child. My parents were pastors, but we'll go into that.
But yeah, David, it's really good to have you with us. Um, yeah, so this is essentially going to be your story. So we would like to start from the very beginning, really. Um, yeah, what are your earliest memories? What formed your childhood?
So for me, I've always been very involved in like tech and media. Um, Growing up, going to school, I always say this and people correct me, but I wasn't educationally gifted in terms of whatever I thought up here, it's very difficult for me to articulate on pen and paper. So I was very creative. I can do things with my hands. Um, if I was to talk to you, you'd understand where I'm coming from. But then you told me to write down what I said, and it wouldn't make any sense. So I found myself being drawn more to technical things. So IT was one of my favorite subjects. I love doing things where I could use my hands and I could use my brain and my hands to kind of solve problems. So for me, it was a battle in school, secondary school, definitely because that's where the pressure is on. Um, I found myself always being that wayward child. I wouldn't focus in lessons. If a class was more theory based, I'd find myself drifting off, causing trouble, talking a lot, being disruptive. And I wasn't disruptive because I was naughty. I was disruptive because I knew that I struggled. So it was my way of masking my limitations. So I was just disruptive. Or sometimes it wouldn't even be a negative disruption. Sometimes it would just be me asking one of my fellow students for help on something, but a teacher's like, "Why are you talking?" And I'd get in trouble. I'd get sent out of class. So um, I tend to always find myself in positions where I'd either not be included in lessons, I'd have to go and do my lessons with somebody else, or um, I'd find myself just drifting off. Sometimes I slept through lessons just because I knew that I couldn't keep up with the level of work. And so to hide my limitations, I would just find a way to drift off and fade into the background. Um, yeah, so that was kind of me in a nutshell, school wise. I was always, I think, yes, 7 and 8. I was a really, I was a really good student. Um, my head teacher from my primary school, my head teacher from my secondary school, they were quite close. They knew each other, and it was very easy for everyone from my primary school to get into the secondary school because of that connection. So I felt like I wasn't just representing myself, I was representing my former head teacher. So I felt like I had to, present myself in a certain way that didn't let her down because, she's filtering her students. So yeah, year 7 and 8 for me, squeaky clean, apart from one incident, which I felt really shaped my school life. So the incident was in my first 2 weeks of school. When you start secondary school, you do induction. So you're sitting in a room with your form teacher, you're getting to know everybody, and so on and so forth. And there was a commotion going on in the corridor with the at the time the year tens. So I'm sitting in my form room and just kind of getting to know people, but my ears are really pricked up. Like my spidey senses. I could hear something going on. So I was in the room, but I wasn't in the room. And anyway, I heard a commotion. It was between a boy and a girl. Now, one thing about me, and this has been the entirety of my life, I do not agree with like male and female violence. Any form of domestic violence, domestic abuse, anything of that nature, I don't agree with it. Nothing to do with anything like what the common person will say, like the weaker sex or anything of that nature. But I just feel like any man who raises his hand to a woman is a weak man in himself. It doesn't mean the woman's weak, because the woman, I've seen women who could take men out. But in yourself, to know that you're gonna lower yourself to that level, is something I don't agree with. And my family's full of females, so I've always had high respect for women anyway. So anyway, this commotion was going on in the corridor, and I heard that there was a slap. And obviously he had hit the girl. There was a big commotion, so everyone's all kicking off. I've run out of my form room and I've run up to this guy without even a second thought, and I've punched him. And he stumbled back, and then the girls kind of grabbed me to protect me, because he's obviously now wanting to retaliate. And everyone's like, "Oh, you've just been banged by a year 7." And it was just like, that moment there, in my defense, it was a very innocent thing. I was just defending somebody. But when I looked at it from outside, it was a very big defining moment. So what happened? Some of the other year 10s that were there were like, this year 7, he's on smoke. Like, he's, you know what I mean? And so they kind of looked at me as, okay, yeah, we can groom this guy. Like, if we can get this guy on board, like, he's someone that is malleable. He's just starting year 7. So as my journey went on, I went from being that good model student to now being recruited into one of the most notorious gangs in South London at the time. And I won't mention too much about the gang, because, again, I don't glorify that stuff, but it was a gang that you don't get initiated into. It's a gang that you don't join. It's a gang that you're kind of born into, you know. If you're in the area, you live in the area you're born into it. So I was one of few people who wasn't a part of the estate that was part of the gang. And again, it started from something innocent, but then I felt that I had a reputation that I needed to uphold. So instead of me turning the offer down, I kind of thought to myself, oh yeah, this is a way for me to kind of get in with people. I'm new in the school. I know that I've got people who look out for me. So again, I was just easily influenced based on my insecurities, maybe, and my limitations. So I went from just being this quiet, nerdy year 7 to being someone who people knew and I felt like respected or feared. But it was more based on my status with this gang rather than me as an individual. I don't think me as a person was very intimidating, but yeah, I ended up being somebody who maybe I wouldn't have been had that incident not happen. But again, I innocently tried to defend somebody who needed help, but other people saw something else from it. So for me, that was one of my biggest lessons that I learned in life, that when you look at a situation, you need to look at a situation holistically. You need to look at a situation from every angle, not just how you see it, because other people see things differently. It's perception. If I drew a 6 on the floor, I see a 6, and the person across from me will see a 9. It's perception. I'll argue that it's a 6, they'll argue that it's a 9. Just because I saw it a certain way, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to see it the way that I did. And I wasn't in a position to negotiate with people and say, oh, well, it wasn't that, it was me just trying to defend somebody. So yeah, that was kind of what shaped my school life. I ended up heavily involved in this gang for a lot of my time in school, which was never good.
That's a really interesting story. I think there's a lot of people up and down the country, but especially from London, who can definitely relate. Growing up in school during that time was definitely like navigating a jungle, knowing where to go, what are the right steps to take, what are the wrong moves to make. So that's really interesting to hear, to be honest, because I know the viewers may not be familiar, but David's like he's a gentle giant. It's rare to see David, really angry or even frustrated, to be honest. If anything, those things come from just wanting things to be of standard.
Yeah.
Right. So cool. So that was year 8, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So that's, you would have been 13, 12 going on 13?
12, 13, yeah.
So moving on from there, How would you say that affected your school life moving forward?
That's a good question. So for me, my focus changed, right? Because I was now somebody who was an integral part of this gang. Because at the time I was a punch now, talk never type of guy. That was my mentality. So everything changed for me. School didn't matter. If something had happened, somebody had called me to say that there was beef somewhere or someone was in trouble, I would drop everything and I'd be gone. So I tend to find myself truanting quite a lot. I tend to find myself in a lot of fights. It wasn't that I was fighting because I wanted to fight. Sometimes I fought because I felt like I had to. It was the only way to defend myself and family and people around me. So it affected me because it took my focus away from something that I was struggling with in the first place, which I probably feel like if I was able to sharpen my skills in secondary school, educationally, it would have helped me deal with a lot of the limitations that I suffer now as an adult. But because my focus wasn't there, it was more on, how I'm perceived by people, and not looking weak. If someone called me and I had an excuse, it's like, what's the excuse? Because we know you, we know what you're on, we know what you're about. So how comes now all of a sudden, do you know what I mean? So I found myself in a position that if I'm up on the fourth floor and there's a fight on the first floor, if I'm not there, something's wrong. People are going to be asking me questions. So it became a point where I didn't care about the educational side. And I used to get a lot of accolades in year 7 and 8. We had a merit system. And every time we had assemblies, I don't know how, even to this day, I couldn't tell you, but every time we had assemblies, I had merit awards and I was getting certificates. And I'm like, how? Because I'm just doing what should be done, really. But I used to get a lot of awards. And as I started to slip deeper and deeper into gang life, I realized that them accolades and awards stopped, and I stopped being put forward for things, and people stopped coming to me for things. I saw that the right people were drawing away from me and the wrong people were kind of gravitating towards me. Now people wanted to know how they could be involved in what I'm involved in. And I'm going to say this. I lived a double life because, as I said, I was a pastor's child, right? So the things that I was involved with was contrary to my beliefs. So even though I was out on road and I was doing dirt, I knew that I shouldn't have been doing it. But at the same time, I felt like I had two different lives. I had my home life and I had the street life. And obviously, if anybody knows about the term code switching, I could be on road, do dirt, and I could fix up my act, walk into my house and talk to my parents like nothing. You would never tell the difference. I can go and talk to an adult and articulate myself without them thinking, oh, this guy's road or he's street. I was very good at doing that. But what I realized was that I had an inner battle within myself all the time. So it was like, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm doing it. But I know that I need to do better. So I was constantly like, I was still going to church with my family, still doing things. But at the same time, when it came down to something, I'd be there, I'd be riding out. So it was a struggle. It was a struggle, school life. I appreciate school, and I don't think I appreciated it until I left. And I realized how many people were actually fighting for me. They were in my corner. I didn't realize. It was only after I left I realized, because I felt like everybody was against me. And I think that's because of my battle in my own mind, rather than people showing me they're against me. So yeah, school life was interesting. If I could go back and do it again, I'd do it differently, seriously. Because it's just fast forwarding to now, doing things like youth work and having to write reports and stuff. Oh man, I struggle so much. Just to write a report and to make it legible to the reader so that they can read it and understand what I'm trying to get at. Because you touched on a point when you was asking a question and said, like, I'm passionate about things. I'm very passionate. And I can articulate that in a way that you can feel what I'm saying. But if this was a transcript and I was writing it now, you probably wouldn't feel the same energy as how I talk it. So I really feel like if I had listened in school, it would have helped me in my future life. But I always say to people, like, my thing, I feel like I'm an exception to the rule, right? I don't see my limitations as limitations. I see them as superpowers. I see them as something different. Like, what you don't struggle with, I struggle with, but I find creative ways to deal with them. So I feel like it just makes me a better person because it's not natural. It's not easy for me. So when I do something, I feel that sense of accomplishment and achievement because I know what it took for me to get there. And so, yeah, I don't see it as a negative thing. I see it as a real positive. So, yeah.
So yeah, you spoke about the inadvertent way that you ended up in gang life.
Yeah.
But then once you got in there, I know you said one of the reasons for staying was the fact that you felt like you had an image that you needed to uphold now. Was there anything else that played a part in you just staying and continuing to play this role? Or was it simply that there's an image now, people might try to test me?
I felt, one thing about gang life that people fail to understand, it's a feeling of belonging. It's a feeling of family. It's a feeling of people care about me. And I have older siblings, but my older siblings were grown when we were young, so I didn't grow up with them. So I never ever really experienced what it was like having an older brother. So when I had my elders in the gang, they felt like my older brothers. So it was like experiencing something new. And, as I say, you felt like people cared about you. They looked out for your well-being and made sure that everything was okay with you and so on and so forth. And even though it was in a negative way, it was still that feeling that I feel like sometimes as human beings, we look for things and you can either get it in a positive way or a negative way. And the things that you might look for is just love, care, affection, just someone looking out for you, someone just being genuine with you. I found that in the gang life because I lacked it in my normal life. And again, being a pastor's child is a blessing and a curse because a lot of people would think it's a good thing, but to me, it was so difficult because everyone expected you to be this child because your parents are pastors. You had to be the yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full. If someone says jump, how high do you want me to jump? When you go to services, you're the first one there and the last one to leave. You go into people's house, your parents are there praying for healing and deliverance. But at the same time, what they were giving to other people, when it came to me, I never had it. And so what happened was because of the failings in my home life, I felt like I was searching for it outside. And I found it again, as I say, in the gang life. And it's not me playing the blame game at all, but it's just putting things into perspective that it was really difficult for me to live up to expectations. Not that people put on me, but you feel like there's this quote unquote expectation of you because your parents have this high level in the faith, for you to do certain things, When I was a child, everyone used to say you were so mannerable, when your parents were around, we'd see you, but we wouldn't hear you. It wasn't a child that used to scream and make noise. They could leave you and get on with what they're doing. And that was who I am, who I was, I never showed my parents up. There was never a time my parents had to scold me in public or even in private for anything that we'd done. Like, if we went out, we'd represent them to the highest standard. But again, imagine if people from that other side of my life were to sit down and have a conversation with my family or sit down and have a conversation with people who saw me on the other side and was like, actually, he does all of this, but if you saw what he does outside, do you know what I'm saying? So there was that expectation that I held of myself that I need to act and be a certain way here, but I also need to act and be a certain way here. I couldn't be that God-fearing, quiet child in the gang life because people run over me, and I couldn't be that ruffian in the church life because people think this guy's nuts. Like, how can he be like that? And his parents are so different. So I felt like I sought after validation because I wasn't getting it from home. And it was only when I grew up and I had the conversation with my mum, because me and my mum are really close, and I had the conversation with my mum and I said, Mum, do you know what? There's certain times when I had issues, I had problems. And instead of you giving me an answer as a mum, you gave me an answer as a pastor. It was always take it to God. It was always here's a scripture. And I was like, all I ever wanted in certain scenarios was just a hug. All I wanted was you just to be my mum. But again, they had their own battles that they were facing. They had their own things that they were dealing with. And I realize now, especially as a father, there is no rule book. There's no guide to being a parent. No one can teach you how to be a parent. Everyone runs their own race. They done what they thought was right based on what they were doing. They were living their life according to, you know, how they felt that they should do. But it's easy for us to neglect things and, you know, family, the things that are right for something else. You know, we get so wrapped up in something. Again, like me, I was so wrapped up in the gang life, I didn't think about my education. I wasn't thinking about if I flunk my GCSEs, what happens in the future. All I was thinking about was riding out. That was it. I weren't thinking about my future. Had I been thinking beyond what I was doing, things would have been different. But, you know, as I said, I don't blame my parents, but it was afterwards, because I feel like I had it rough, but my two younger siblings, I think they had it a bit better than I did because they were able to learn from me. So I was kind of the molding of my parents in that relationship that my younger siblings had it a bit better than I did. But, you know, I'm thankful every day for the opportunities that arose through certain things, because even now as a dad, and I look at things, I hear my son, he says some things to me and I'm like, son, listen, we're not having this conversation. I remember he said something to me that made me laugh. He's like, oh, Dad, you know, some of me and my friends, we run around and we're a little gang, like we're a little crew. And I'm like, yeah, you're in primary school, son. Like, you know what I mean? You don't want that dark cloud hanging over your head from such a young age. And you also don't want to think like that. You know, you want your family to be your family. And family, again, is not just blood. You know, a lot of people who I class as my family we're not blood related, but they're people who, you know, there's that sense of loyalty. There's that sense of, you know, just supporting each other and doing the right thing. I know who my family is because I know who I can pick the phone up and call if I need someone. So again, you know, you're growing up and you're around people. I always say to people, you know, like my son, I say, you're only going to be around these people for a few years of your life. Then when you transition from primary school to secondary school, only certain people from now are going to follow you there. So you could devote all of your time into people, or you can invest all your time in yourself. Because when you transition and you've wasted all your time on people, you're only got yourself to blame when you're out there left in the cold and, you know, you've got nothing to show for it. So again, had I have not devoted more of my time to that, I probably would have been better off. But again, it's my story, innit? So
Nah, I really resonate with what you said when it comes to that saying, blood is thicker than water. And I think it was only until recently where the full saying really came out, where it really says the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of birth, which essentially means those that you choose really are who we can class as family, in the sense of, I've chosen this person, so I've chosen to walk beside them, go through the good times and the bad times. Yeah. Whereas with family, a lot of the time it can feel like an obligation because we have the same name, or we share the same parents, therefore I have to act a certain way around you. So with that being said, so the family that you at first inadvertently chose was the gang, but then you made the conscious decision to then walk with them through the tough times and the better times. How was that? I guess we have to be conscious to not glorify it, of course, but there are realities when it comes to that life. Yeah. And the longer you stay in it, the more that is asked of you, essentially. So I wanted to just go into that a little bit for those that may be towing a tightrope or flirting with the idea. Yeah. You know, well, what does it really mean? How was it for you when you were in the gang?
As I say, like for me, I battled a lot with my conscience. That was one thing. And I feel like a lot of people who talk about their story never really hone in on the things that people don't physically see, right? Once you've done what you've done and you've got to go home and your knuckles are bruised and you have to now think about what you've done to somebody, because, none of us are naturally born to go out there to fight and, to do the things that we do. I mean, I never carried any knives. I've never stabbed anyone. I've never gone to that level just because I think too much about it. But when it came to fighting with my fist, I would, and there'd always be a limit and a cutoff point for me because I felt like my morals and my conscience kicked in. There's a job that needs to be done, but I don't need to go beyond it. I don't need to batter you black and blue for you to know that I've sent you a message. And just as much as I inflicted damage, I received a lot of damage as well. I feel like I made myself vulnerable by being part of a gang because I never really understood the gang, the level of the gang, or what they were into before I kind of signed up. And I didn't realize what I was taking on, what other gangs these people have issues with. The moment that you associate yourself with a gang, you're taking on all of their problems. You're taking on all of their past and everything. Someone might have done something 10 years ago, but now you associate with them. We're coming for you because you're a part of them. And I never realized that at first. I just thought, yeah, I'm part of this gang and, they're my family now and they look out for me. But really and truly, if my older had beef and someone couldn't get him, they're coming for me. And they may catch me slipping in a time when I'm not operating with the gang, not around the gang. There was several times I was with family. I remember I was out shopping with my mum and a group of boys approached me. And I was just like, oh man, like it's a bit of a sticky one. But I couldn't let myself down or show myself up. But at the same time, I couldn't portray a certain thing to my family. So I was in a situation where it was fight or flight, really. Luckily, good thing about me is I've got a good way of negotiating. I can talk myself in and out of any situation. So I think I was able to diffuse certain sticky situations by just talking about it. And it became a thing of, oh, don't worry, when we catch you next time. Because at the end of the day, as I say, I have morals and respect. If you're in a situation where you're with your mom, you're with your girl, you're with your children, there's lines you don't cross. And I think sometimes my good morals rubbed off on other gangs and gang members because it was like, hold on a second, we don't really need to do this. He's out with family. We don't like, what is it going to prove type of thing. But, when I was doing what I was doing, there's that high. It's just like anything. There's that high. There's that adrenaline rush. Like I always say to people, and I laugh about this now, but if I had to travel to beef, I have to punch someone. That was just my thing. There's no way that you're making me travel somewhere to go and talk to someone, spud them or walk away. Like it just wasn't me. If I've traveled to beef, someone's getting knocked out and then we can talk about it afterwards. And so for me, there was that adrenaline rush that I'm hyped. When we're going to the beef, I'm hyped. I'm pumped up. We might be listening to music or we might be spraying bars or just talking about something. But when I get there, I'm pumped. As soon as the first person says something, I'm there, bang. And then that was it. But then when I came down and was back with my thoughts away from everybody else, I was just like, why did I do that? Like, there was actually no need. There was no real reason for me to do it. I don't even know the person I punched in the face. They don't have no legitimate beef with me personally, but I'd done it because I felt like it was the right thing to do for the gang and for my status, I think. But yeah, and also growing up, I didn't really, as a young black boy, we don't really talk about mental health and stuff. It's one thing that, if somebody has any mental health issues, you're just classed as crazy, they just class you as mad, there's something wrong with you. We never really learn about mental health and how mental health affects you. I always say mental health is like physical health because physically you can see someone whether they're healthy or unhealthy, right? Mentally, you can see if someone's healthy or unhealthy, by the way that they talk, by the way they act, by the way they dress. It doesn't matter if I'm waking up to go to my living room, if I'm waking up to go out. I still will brush my teeth. I'll still do my hair. I'll still spray my cologne, even if I'm just staying in my house. Because in myself, I'm feeling good. So that must resonate in how you see me. If someone knocks my door, they're never going to catch me off guard. My breath's not going to be stinking, or I'm not going to smell of body odor, because mentally I'm in a good place. So that obviously shows in everything I do. So I do feel like, looking back now, I can realize how my mental health was literally like on the floor, because I was constantly battling between good and evil. And I was constantly like, I know I should be doing better, but I'm still doing this thing. And you just continue going down the rabbit hole. And, you know, to say that I was depressed in that time, maybe I was, but I never noticed it at the time, because I felt like everyone was like, I was riding high. You know, the gang respects me, people respect me, my name is ringing bells, people wouldn't trouble me because they know that, you know. But at the same time, as I say, I would have to go and face my family and sit in a room with my family knowing that, yeah, I'm not that model son or not that model older brother that they look up to. I'm not, you know, I'll go and sit in church and think, oh, what if someone got a word and just told my entire life in front of everybody and realized that I was just a phony, you know? So I was battling with that all the time. Like, I wonder who knows me from where, if someone knows me from outside, I don't know who, as I say again, when I was going out to fight people, I don't know who I was beefing. I could have been someone's child who my parents were going to minister for. Do you know what I'm saying? They could be going to do a hospital visit to pray for the guy who I banged in the face like a few hours ago. Like, so I was always just conflicted with the decision.